Ty Moore,
Here.
Jim Harless,
Here.
Kyle Hickey,
Here.
Pat McDonald, Kim White.
Here.
We stand and do the pledge of allegiance. Okay, I get a motion and a second for the approval of the agenda, please.
So moved. I second.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Ms. White,
Yes.
Mr. Hickey,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes. And I need a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes. So moved. I'll second.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Hickey,
Yes.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Ms. White,
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes. I think this.
All right, it's recommended that the board approve the consent agenda as follows. Item A, recommended the board approve resignations of Mike Ross and Jill Sheets for the respective positions. Item B is a recommendation to employ a list of supplemental contracts. I'm going to bother to read through those, a whole host of those. Item C is a recommendation to employ Trudy McDonald as a credentialed substitute for the upcoming school year. Item D is a recommendation to approve a list of classified substitutes for the positions as noted. Item E is a recommendation for the board to approve membership in the Ohio Coalition for Equity and Adequacy. Item F, recommendation to approve a memorandum of understanding with Hopewell Health, provide behavioral health services to our students. Item G is a recommendation to approve a then and now invoice with the Rio Grande Bookstore. And item H is a recommendation to approve the fall sports schedule. I believe that concludes the consent agenda.
Okay, I think we do have an item to remove there, Mr. McDonald.
Item C.
Okay. Let's vote on that one separate. So I need a motion and a second.
So moved. I second.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Ms. White,
Yes.
Mr. Hickey,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Abstain.
Mr. Moore.
Yes. And for the rest of them.
I so moved.
I'll second.
Ms. White,
Yes.
Mr. Hickey, Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes. Okay, no new business. Mr. Howard, you want to talk about school funding?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming this evening. I did reach out to all three of our union presidents and asked you to invite your members here this evening. I want to go over what has been approved for the biennial budget and show how that's going to affect our district. There will likely be some kind of discussion as to what we need to do moving forward. Having said that, it's important to note that back in 2017, two longtime Ohio legislators, Bob Cupp and John Patterson, both of different parties, decided to come together to create what became known as the Fair School Funding Formula. This was a bipartisan effort. It took over 2 years to do this. They used a workforce or work task force of superintendents and treasurers throughout the state of Ohio to come up with the actual cost of educating a child in different places throughout the state. It was to be implemented in sections. It was a 6-year plan. The first 2 bienniums, it was not fully implemented, but we were told and everyone understood that it was going to be fully implemented in this biennial budget. Before I go any further, I want to say that there's likely to be some questions tonight, and we don't have public participation, but because there may be questions after we get finished, I'd like to ask the president here if you would entertain a motion to suspend our public participation rules for this evening, so that if there is questions, I think that we can
Absolutely.
handle questions.
I'll make the motion to suspend it
I'll
for this
second.
meeting.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mr. Hickey?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes.
So, so let me start off with saying that what you're gonna see here, this evening is in no way meant to be, to vilify any other districts, to, be derogatory towards any other districts. But we're gonna show some comparisons of how some districts are funded compared to the way that, our district is funded. And I think that it's likely that most people aren't aware of this. So I'm gonna start off with our most recent five-year forecast. And it's important that you understand, I know it's hard to see from there, most of these slides are not that small, you'll be able to see a little better, but if you take a look at where it says fiscal year, we'll go back to, all the way back to the beginning, that bottom number, that 5.7 million. What that means is that we ended that year with $5.7 million. We started the next year, fiscal '23, with that same 5.7 million. We deficit spent $830-some thousand. Means we spent more than what we had coming in. So we ended that year with just under $5 million. Well, the next year, in '24, we start that year with $5 million, and we banked almost $3 million. And the way that we did that was, we had all of our ESSER funds, our COVID money, and we chose to spend our ESSER funds and COVID money on people. Now, someone could say, well, when you saw that you were deficit spending $490,000 one year and $833 the next year, why wouldn't you have started making cuts or whatever at that point in time? And the reason is because the Fair School Funding Formula was supposed to be implemented, and it was going to give us about $4.6 million coming into 25-26 school year. So it would erase deficit spending going forward. So anyway, we banked about $3 million that year, so we ended up '24 with $7.8 million. We had COVID money left over for this past year, the fiscal year that ended just June 30th. We banked almost another $1 million. So we are now sitting at $8.7 million, give or take a few dollars, because she's not completely balanced out since it just ended in the last week or so. But we're gonna be right around that $8.7 million, which is the most money that we've had, in a fairly long amount of time. But the problem is, you'll see that in '26, the year that just started July 1, fiscal '26, we're looking at $2.8 million of deficit spending. Now, when she had to create this five-year forecast, this is when all the crap was going on in Columbus of what's the budget gonna be. The governor came out with a plan. The governor came out with a plan, the House came out with a plan, the Senate came out with a plan. But the day that we had to do this, by law, you have to have a five-year forecast approved in May, and nothing was final. So we were told that we should use the House plan, because the House plan was basically holding districts harmless, nobody could get less money than what you got this last year. We actually were gaining $106,000. Now, $106,000 when you're talking about 25 million is really nothing. It doesn't pay for hardly anybody, even half of you in this room. But it's better than losing 1.3 million that the governor proposed. So had the formula been fully implemented, we would have gained, according to Policy Matters Ohio, 4.6 million on top of what we got in '25. So once again, I'll go back to this slide here. So why would we be overly concerned here? Because we've got 4.6 million coming in. It easily eats up that deficit spending. And maybe we tweak a few things here or there. We could handle the $2.8 million deficit spending. What we can't handle is now we've lost about $1.4 billion. And I'm going to go through those plans. So the governor's proposal, he said Jackson City Schools was gonna lose $1.35 million. There were a lot of big winners, a lot of big losers in that proposal. Some districts were gaining $2 million. We were losing $1.3 million. So then the House comes out with their version, we're gaining $106,000. That was what she used to create that 5-year forecast. So the 5-year forecast is not accurate because we had to, at the time, the Senate version wasn't even put out yet. And I've been doing this a long time, and I've never seen a biennial budget get worse. You guys that's been here a while, you know that every year they start off not giving you anything, and then people go and raise Cain and get enough attention drawn, and next thing you know, you end up with a lot better than what I started off with. But instead, this one went the other way, because the Senate version had us losing negative $1.5 million. Now, they did tweak it slightly to the tune of about $100 and some thousand, so we actually ended up losing about $1.4 million instead. So this is the governor's proposal. Again, I know most of you can't necessarily see these numbers, but it shows that we were expected to lose the $1.35 million. Gallipolis was going to gain 1.4 almost. And all the yellow there are the schools that were going to lose money. The dark are the ones that were going to gain. A lot of winners and a lot of losers based on the governor's initial proposal. And what I did was I looked at all the neighboring counties: Gallia, Jackson, Benton, Athens, Lawrence, Meigs, Pike County, Ross County, Scioto County, just to see where everybody fell. I'll point out one right here: Scioto County, Clay Local. They got 579 kids in their whole district, K through 12, and they were going to gain $1.7 million with 579 kids. So the next proposal that came out was the House proposal, and that was the one that obviously we should like, because nobody was going to lose any money under that. Everybody was going to be guaranteed at least the amount of money that you got this past year. Now, there wasn't as many big winners, and there were no big losers. So this is one that we would have really liked to have seen passed. Again, far cry from getting $4.6 million that we thought we were going to get, but a lot better than losing $1.4 million. So you can see what the other districts were going to get there. Oak Hill was going to gain about $50,000, Wellston about $55,000. Gallipolis was still going to gain about $770-some thousand under that method. And then again, I have all those districts and how it's going to affect them. Then next came the Senate proposal. And there's some better slides in this. This is almost impossible for you to read. But you can see here, this tells how many students we have in our district. Approximately, it says estimated, foundation and aid for fiscal '25. So we got about $16.6 million this past year in state funding. The Senate version was saying that for this coming year, they're going to give us 15.8, and then the following year, another 15.8, a few $1,000s one way or another difference, which comes up to that, if I go back, this $1.568 million loss. Now again, it didn't end up quite that. It ended up about 1.4 something by the time, I think they added $27 in fiscal '26 per student and $40 per student in '27. So if you do the math on that, you gain 100-some thousand. And so we actually only lost 1.4 something million. So this is important to note. When you're forced with making decisions of cutting such big numbers, like hundreds of thousands of dollars or $1 million or $2 million, you can't do it by changing the pencils that you buy and the paper that you buy. I mean, it's all in people, unfortunately. And what this shows is that we spend about 55% of our money on salaries. We spend about 28% on fringe benefits. So if you add those together, that's 83% of our money goes for that. But this column here, this 11.21, purchase services, that's people also. It's just not people that are our employees. That's people that come from like the ESCs, where we get our OT, our occupational therapists, our speech people, those people. So it's still people, and it's significant dollars, but it's still salaries. So basically, what you really have to play with here are these two little lines here of the 3.46 of supplies and the 2.43 for other expenses. You still gotta pay your utility bills and all that stuff. So you can't really make a dent in that kind of saving, trying to save money from those categories when you gotta cut $2 million or some big number. And this is not abnormal. I went ahead and put up here Wellston, Oak Hill, and Benton County, their numbers. Rather than do the math from the top down, the top three, just look at the last two numbers. Wellston, you know, they've got about, what, 4% of theirs left, so about 96% of their money goes towards people. Oak Hill, they got about 6%, so they're about 94% of their money, and Benton County's about 6% for those two bottom categories, so 93, 94%. So every district, about anywhere from 90 to 94% generally is spent on people, salaries, fringe benefits, those kind of things. Now, this is really important, and I want to say this so that everything that I've put up here, you can fact check. You can go to Department of Education Workforce, ODU, or whatever it's called now, DEW, and if you go to the query and type in CUP report, CUPP, you can go back and get information from before even 2010. I went back as far as 2010. But these numbers are not numbers that Phil Howard made up. They come straight off the CUP reports. Everybody can get them off of ODE. But what I want to point out here is, if you look back at, this is just state funding. Our funding comes primarily from three sources, all right? You have state funding, you have your local funding, and you have your federal funding. That makes up how much money we get per pupil. If you look at this chart here, in fiscal 10, the state was giving us about $5,500 per kid. Wellston was getting about $66, so they were getting about $1,000 more per kid than what we were getting. Oak Hill was getting about $300 more per kid than we were getting, and Benton County was getting about $1,500 more per kid. Now keep in mind that when I say per kid, we got 2,178 or whatever it was, so about 2,200 kids. If you multiply that by just $1,000 more per kid, that's $2.2 million more per year for our district. But look what happens between 10 and 21 and 24. And this is just the state funding. I'll show you the overall funding. In 21, we're getting almost $7,000 per kid. All of a sudden, Wellston's getting $12,000 per kid. That's $5,000 more per kid from the state. If we're funded at that same level, times 2,200, where's your math people in here? How much is that? That's $11 million. It's $11 million more that we would get if we were funded at that same rate. And you can see what the others, all of a sudden, Oak Hill was getting $300 more per pupil. Now they're getting $3,000 more. Fund us that way, it's $6.6 million more for our district. And Benton County, you know, they're getting about, what, $3,000 or $4,000 more per kid. So if you go to 24, which is the most recent CUP report that's out there, we were getting $7,600 a kid. Wellston's up to $12,200. So, you know, there's what, $4,600 more per kid. Oak Hill's still getting over about $3,000 more than us, and Benton County's getting about $4,000 more than us per kid. Per kid. Keep in mind, 2,200 kids. So, if you want to make a comparison here, we have 2,178 kids in our district. Wellston, on that same report, had 1,122, and Oak Hill had 1,011. If you add those two together, they have 2,133 kids. We have 2,178. We got state funding, $16.6 million. The two of those combined for about the same number of kids. got $24.2 million. So $7.6 million more for the same number of kids. Now, we'll get to the whys of all this here in a minute. But look at Benton County. Benton County, we've got about 600 more kids than they do. And they get $1 million more in state funding than what we do. And we have 600 more kids than they do. So, that was talking about state funding. Let's look at local funding. That's your property taxpayers, commercial, residential. Could possibly be, we don't have any of this, but if you have gas lines that run through your district, you get money from that and so forth. So in fiscal 10, there wasn't that much difference per pupil. We were in the neighborhood, well, actually we were higher than everybody else. And then in 21, all of a sudden, Oak Hill passed us, about $500 more per kid. Benton County was getting about $4,000, about $1,400 more per kid. And keep in mind, those districts are also getting more kids, more money. State, this is local. So the disparity just keeps getting even bigger. And then at the federal, the third piece of our funding, if you look at the federal, you'll see that we're at $3,300 a kid. Wellston's at $4,700. So you take all three of those combined, your state, your local, and your federal, and this is the grand total per pupil funding. We get about $16,000 a kid. Wellston gets over $21,000, so about $5,300, $5,400 more per kid. Oak Hill's up to $19,000, so about $3,000 more per kid. And Benton County's at 21, so they're at over $5,000 more per kid. Now, I was always told before that, well, the reason that we're not getting as much money is because we have declining enrollment, and that's true. But I got to thinking, I said, well, I want to know what everybody else's enrollment is. So I went back to 2010 from those CUP reports, and I pulled off everybody's enrollment in 2010, in 21, and 24 to see. We have lost 460 kids since 2010. Now where, I don't know. I mean, we got a lot of kids that go to online schools. We've got parents who have opted to homeschool their kids because they've made that easier to do now. I'm not sure about the CCP with kids that go full-time CCP. And maybe there's just not as many kids out there. Might be part of it. I don't know. But I thought, man, 460 kids, that's a lot that we've lost. But when I looked at the other districts, and I looked at Wellston, Oak Hill, Benton County, the Gallipolis, and Gallia County, and then all of the Orange County schools. If you look at it percentage-wise, yeah, we lost 460 kids. Wellston lost 439 kids during that time, and they don't have as many kids as we do. So we lost about 17.4% of our population. Wellston lost 27%. Oak Hill lost only 300 kids, but again, they're smaller, so they lost 22%. Here's a district over here, if you look at South Point, they had over 2,000 kids in 2010, and now, they're down to under 1,300 kids. They've lost 37% of their student population since then. So that can't be the reason why we got hammered so bad in this budget and everybody else didn't, because clearly everybody's lost enrollment and everybody's lost really at a greater clip than what we have. So here's the culprit, we believe. If you go back to 2010 on those CUP reports, this is the poverty level, or sometimes also known as the economically disadvantaged. And in the funding formula, there you get paid more money from the state for every kid that's economically disadvantaged. So we're showing 53%, Wellston 60, Oak Hill 62, Benton County 70. Not a lot of difference, I guess maybe between us and Benton County, 17% difference. Well, in fiscal 21, when you check it for 21, looks like we actually got a little bit richer because we now have 46%, only 46% of our kids, and these other districts are at 100%. What happened during that time? Does anybody know? The free lunch thing called CEP, Community Eligibility Provision.
which we were not eligible for. I took a beating for about 4 years, people just always complaining about, I don't feel Howard just wants to make everybody pay for their lunch, why don't Jackson have free lunch? Because we don't qualify, you had to have a certain percentage to qualify. We couldn't do it if we wanted to. These districts did qualify, and in the funding formula, the way the funding formula works, every kid that you have that is economically disadvantaged, you get more money for. So when theirs goes through the funding formula, that's also the year that you saw the big jump in the state and how much money each school district gets in the state. So that's the only thing that I can figure that it had to be. Now, you said, all right, well, we went CEP this year. And I'll be honest with you, we probably lost a couple $100,000 in the lunchroom fund by doing it, but we made up for it on the back end because 100% of our kids were considered economically disadvantaged, and so we were on the gravy train of getting all of our kids. Well, guess what? Now the state says, we can't do this anymore because all these other schools have gotten on CEP. They dropped the rate, which allowed us to really qualify. A bunch of other schools got on, and now there's not enough funding to continue it the way that they've done it. So the Senate plan, keep in mind, the Senate plan that got adopted, they guaranteed rates back to fiscal 21. In fiscal 21, we weren't on CEP. Other districts were. So when you look at how bad the other districts got hit in this budget compared to us, the only conclusion that I can draw is that it's in that right there. So it's important that I point this out to you. And again, you can't hardly read these numbers, but this is the 5-year forecast that I kind of inherited when I came. Some of you guys were here, those that we weren't. But if you will look, the very bottom number down here, we were projected 5 years out to be $10 million in the red in 2011. Obviously, that didn't happen. We started making some changes, but I started in 2008. We had $847,000 when I started. And we were going to deficit spend $1.6 million. So we would have been broke in the hole at the end of that first year. So we had to do something drastic. So we started in 08, 09, we had 13 people leave. We didn't take anybody's job. I wanted to try to do it through attrition. I don't want to take people's jobs if I don't have to. So during that 4-year period, we did away with 20 jobs. These are teaching jobs. This you will have a hard time reading, but so there's 23 teaching positions that saved the district about $1.5 million a year during that time period that we did not replace. And guess what? We haven't replaced those. So that's a problem for us because now that we have to cut again, I don't have 23 extra teaching positions out there that we can cut without really making it hurt. We cut an assistant principal position. We have replaced that position. We still don't have an assistant superintendent. That's the third thing on that list. We have a couple of these aides, office aides, that we didn't replace. This $35,000 for Director of Special Projects, what that is, for board members, none of you were here during that time, is that when Dr. Crabtree rehired, there was a $35,000 savings in what she cost us for the district. I could easily argue that she's been here for 11 or 12 years since that happened, that her salary alone has probably saved the district $400,000 during her tenure here because when we rehired her back, we hired her back at a lesser salary. The next thing on there, you'll see athletic director, same thing. Bob Kite did rehire, come back for a lesser amount of money, and so there was about $35,000 savings there. Then we have three custodial positions that we did away with back then and did not replace. Those have not been replaced. So I don't have a lot of wiggle room there because we're pretty thin in that area now. I have a maintenance position that we did not replace. We did away with a position there through attrition, did not replace that position. We had a part-time maintenance person. We don't have that anymore. We had a couple of these office aides and library aides we didn't, And then I have here one full-time bus route position. Now this chart, this timeline ends in 2013. I can tell you that, I talked to Glenna before I came up here. She started in her capacity in 2014. And we had 27 bus routes in 2014. We have 22 now. So we've done away, consolidated 5 bus routes. Now, you could go to any elementary building especially and watch kids get off the bus, and I get asked this all the time, but why do we even run buses? I mean, nobody rides them. Look at the cars and the drop-off line every single day. But you have to. And we are 181 square miles. So it doesn't matter if you've got 20 kids on the bus or 60, you gotta cover all of that area. And unless you want kids getting on the bus at 5 o'clock in the morning, you don't really have much choice. I don't know how much lower we can go than the 22 routes that we're at right now. So we've made cuts and changes all along, even since 2013. Something that hits you guys, because your unions gave up some things to help us get through that time. For example, if you look down here, this tuition reimbursement, it was a $20,000 savings. It's never been put back in the contract, and I honestly don't know of very many school districts that don't have some kind of fund that will help people go back and get their masters and so forth. It was taken out of the contract back when we didn't have any money, and it has never ever been put back in. This teacher 125 money. If you remember, those of you that's been here for a while, back then you got $125 to be able to buy supplies and stuff for your classrooms. We did away with that in the contract because we were pinching pennies, and that saved us $20,000. Well, that is back now, but it came back kind of slowly. If you remember, wasn't it $85 for a while? And I think here in the last contract or two, it got back to the 125. So think of that. You were getting $125 to spend on your classrooms back in 2008. It's 2025, and we're just now getting back the $125 that they were getting then. So what I want to say is that look at what's happened. This is what's happened to our district over the years because of the way we're funded versus everybody else. This is the teacher salary trends, and again, this comes straight off of ODE, off the cut report. In fiscal 10, we were the highest paid teachers of those 4 school districts, $500 higher than Benton County average. In 21, we had a couple of them that already passed us. Wellston was really close. And in 24, the most recent data that we have, in 24, look how far behind we are. I'm sorry, but I can only work with what I have to work with. But that's not good. Same can be said for the administrators. Now that administrator's one can be skewed a little easier because you don't have as many, and so if you've got somebody that's been in a position for 30 years, they obviously make more money than somebody who's been in for 2 years. And with only being a few, it can really, the average can change. But again, same thing, I mean, in fiscal 24, you've got Wellston and Oak Hill that's both considerably ahead of where we are. But here's why. This is the history of the teacher salary increases in our district, and generally OC 046 pretty much is almost always the same as the teachers. This is the increases that we've got. I went back to 2003. Now I came 2008, 2008-9, so the first 4 contracts that I negotiated, you guys got 0%. Now, that hurt you then. I apologize again, but it's gonna hurt you now, and it's gonna hurt you forever. You're never getting that money back. It's gonna hurt your retirement. But we did what we had to do at that time because of the financial predicament that we were in. So for those of you who were here then, we're grateful that you guys did that, and you guys felt some pain during that time. But there's nobody that can say that, well, you guys just don't know how to manage your money. You just borrow your money and throw it away. No, we're not. We don't have the same amount of resources that a lot of the other districts do, as I've just hopefully shown you. So that's pretty much where we're at going forward. You'll be doing a new 5-year forecast, and that's going to change. I can tell you about pretty close to what it's gonna end up looking like. Basically, if you go to this number right here, this 2.3 million right here, and subtract 1.4 million off of it, we will have about $1 million starting in 28, and you got a huge deficit spending thing there, so you won't get through 28 if we do nothing. So, that's where we're at. At this time, I don't know, Ward, do you have any questions on them? Ask questions. You want them to ask work?
Phil, one thing before you do, can you better explain how the disaster's new budget that is signed, approved, is what we gotta live with 2 years, is some reason tied back to 21? You went through that pretty fast, but it's tied back to 21 funding. At that point, we were not eligible for the free lunch program, and that is biting us in the butt now,
Exactly.
hard.
I don't know if you heard what Kyle said, but the Senate plan that got approved was guaranteeing rates, guaranteeing your funding back to 2021. And in 2021, we were not on CEP, so we had 40-some, maybe below 50-some% kids that were economically disadvantaged. Other districts around had already gotten on CEP because they qualified, and we didn't. And so that ended up hurting us then, and it's hurting us now because they're guaranteeing going back to 2021. The House budget that they proposed would have guaranteed funding at this last year's rate, and would have guaranteed that we would have gotten at least that 16.6 million estimated number that we got this year. But they didn't go with that, they ended up going with the Senate voters. And I know what happened there. And I need to say this too. I should have probably led with this, or at least talked about this. But you guys have seen the emails that I've seen. Jessica's done a great job trying to make everybody aware of everything that's going on. And I want to thank all of you that reached out to your legislators, those of you who wrote letters, who made phone calls, who went to Columbus to protest and all that stuff. Unfortunately, it fell on deaf ears. But thank God that budgets are biennial. You know, every 2 years there's going to be another one. You can't stop screaming now, because we can survive this. We'll come up with a plan, and I'm not going to say there won't be some pain. We've got to find another revenue source, or there's going to be some real pain. But we can survive this, and hopefully get people in Columbus that understand what districts down here are going through, and we'll come up with something that's a fair plan. Actually, let's just implement the plan that was developed, and that would have given us the 4.6 million. But our legislators instead choose to spend $1 billion last year, $1 billion on vouchers for kids to go to private and religious schools. $1 billion. Now, you say, I think, and this is something I think hurts us down here, is I think a lot of people down here don't pay attention to that, because we really only have one little school here that happens to, so it's not like in the suburban areas where there's one on every corner and it's hitting you in the face all the time. Here you got one little school, so how much can that really hurt us? Well, where it really hurts us is that's $1 billion out of, the pie's only so big in Columbus. It's so big. And that's $1 billion that could have been spent on public education, that instead went to the privates and the vouchers. And that $1 billion would have made, I think they were less than $2 billion short of being able to fully fund it. I also mentioned that they decided to spend $600 million for a new stadium for the Browns or whatever. So there's $1.6 billion that could have been put into the Patterson funding formula.
If I could say something, to that the 1 billion, because the $600,000 came from unclaimed funds, but that $1 billion it's not even legal for them to even do that, because that's in the Constitution, that the money we spend on the common school or the public school, that money's not even legally being spent. And the other thing is, the other part of it is that they're not held to the same standards for state testing, for attendance, and all the same standards that we're held to, they're not held to. So we're getting hit twice there, that way. So that's that's another thing, and that, I think you're probably all aware of it, I know Jessica is keeping you informed, but I think you're aware that the first court case was just completed on it in Franklin County Common Pleas Court, and, it was a win for the public schools, because the judge ruled that it was unconstitutional for them to be doing that. But now it's gotta go through the appeals process, either 10th District Court of Appeals, then it could go back to the Common Pleas Court, which will probably rule like they did, the judge will, and then it could go to the Supreme Court. So that's, but right now, it's in between the ruling and the appeals court. So,
And there's no guarantee that $1 billion that they spent, that they're gonna take it and give it to public education. Matter of fact, they'll probably, as, the way they are, they might dig their heels in even worse and not want to give us anything and just save it or spend it on something else. But my point is, it's $1 billion, the money was there. It's $1 billion more that they could have spent. And here's what's crazy about that is that if you look at the numbers of the kids that attend those schools, those numbers only went up to we did. 1.8% more kids attended privates with vouchers than what were attending at the beginning. So what does that mean? That means you could afford it, so you were already sending your kid there, and now it's a rebate for you at the expense of public schools.
So you can donate for Michael Hayden.
Something else we need to mention though, 67 items were line item vetoed by the governor. A lot of those were property tax issues, so we don't even know at this point in time if we're gonna get what they even said.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we might not be done getting raked over the coals, because if they override some of those vetoes, there's one about inside millage, and I'm not going to even attempt to try to explain that because it's super complicated. But it could cost us over another $1 million, right, Teresa, if they override the governor's veto on that. So, I mean, he actually saved public schools a lot of pain. Now, he could, in my opinion, should have vetoed the whole daggone thing, but the vetoes that he did put out there really helped us, because they're all property tax reform and would really hurt public school districts if they override those. Now, they have until December of, not 25, December of 26 to override those vetoes. I don't understand why it's that long, because they do have that long to do it. I'm assuming that if they're gonna do it, it's more likely to happen sooner than later, because like anything else, once it's been so long, kind of people forget about it. But it could possibly, they're organizing now to try to get the votes to override his vetoes, which would then cost us even more money. Anybody out here have?
I just had a question on the CEP thing. I know you mentioned to me, I don't remember if you said it. What is the actual poverty rate? When they all say 100, it's not actually 100, doesn't it round up? It's not their actual number when they get accepted into that program? Like, where you have the poverty percentage, how you had them at 100%, is that their actual poverty rate for students?
No,
What is their
it's that
average
way
rate?
because of the CEP. I mean, because you can't tell me there's not one kid that lives in Ralston, Oak Hill, or Van County whose parents should be paying for their lunch. I mean, you know that's not
So
true.
it rounds it up.
I mean, ours is going to show 100% for this past year, right?
Yeah, we about 98%.
Yeah, 90, I don't know why it's the 98, 99.92 or whatever. It's basically 100%.
That's crazy that if you qualify, they just put you at.
They should be using what you really are. You know, you can get that number. I mean, you have to qualify based on what they call direct certified. That means that your family is getting some kind of public assistance. You get those numbers from like Job and Family Services or whatever. But, so there's two numbers when it comes to the economically disadvantaged. You can be economically disadvantaged because your parents are getting some kind of public assistance, or you can be economically disadvantaged because mom and dad, they may both work, but they just have really low income jobs, and they fill out that paper, and there's that formula that you plug in, and they make less than this, and they qualify for free, less than this, they qualify for reduced, and so on. But those don't count towards being eligible for CEP. Only the ones that are direct certified from down at the Job and Family Services. And we and we have never met that. We might end up with, I think one of those slides was showing us that, let me find that number. I think it was showing us that. Yeah, this showing us that 55% in 24, and I think, was it 45 direct cert you had to have then? Don't hold me to this. I believe that you had to have like 45% direct cert to be qualified for CEP. Well, we got 55%, but that's 55% of direct cert and the people who fill out the form, who have jobs that don't pay enough and their kids qualified that way. If we would have had the 55% just direct cert, we would have jumped on CEP at that time too. Any other, yeah?
You had mentioned exploring other sources of revenue. Can you offer any insight of what that looks like? Or, I mean, it's kind of limited on what you can do on school grounds, right? Or what is that kind of?
Well, we're not gonna get there by bake sales and.
Right.
You'd be looking at an income.
Yeah, you're probably looking at
Property taxes.
some kind of a levy. And there's different options with that.
Which Phil, historically in this town is,
You have
Bill
that
paid.
slide.
Uh,
That's the last slide of it.
Actually, if you look, I have our levy history. And now, we haven't gone on the ballot since 2000 and asked the public for any money. And that was the bond issue for the new schools, which is pretty close to being paid off within the next year.
Next year.
Next year. But here's the problem, this is my 2 cents, board, for when it comes to, if you're asking me, maybe you didn't, but somebody out here kind of did, about a property tax levy versus an income tax levy. There's pros and cons to both of them, but with all of the uncertainty, what you brought up, all the uncertainty about the property tax and how they're gonna override and override these vetoes and change it, I don't think that a property tax is the way to go, because it's possible that if you did put it on the ballot and it passed, that they change it and we don't even gain from it. So, to me, that's out.
you know, there's there's, I don't know if they ever got introduced, but there's, bills out there that basically eliminate property tax altogether right now. They're floating around, they've not made it.
We got a
anywhere, but-
gubernatorial candidate who's going to do away with property taxes completely, so I don't know where people think that you're gonna get the funding to pay for all the things that, so we all wanna have the fire department come when we call, we all wanna have the police show up. I want somebody to mow the cemetery where my dad's buried. All those things cost money, and they're in property taxes that you pay. And so if we do away with property taxes, there's gonna have to be something to make up for that. Someone did a study on it and said that the only way to generate that same amount of money, not the only way necessarily, but one way would be that sales tax would have to increase like 19% to be able to get that same amount of money if people don't have to pay the property taxes. So and then even with an income tax as an option, there's two options with income tax. There's earned income tax and there's traditional income tax. The earned income tax is where people who have pensions and Social Security don't pay. It doesn't cost them any money. Traditional income tax, those people are taxed. So you have to look at those things. I think that Teresa and I have looked, and we kind of know what each quarter, when you put it on a ballot, it has to be on in increments of a 0.25%. Number one, you don't decide what percent you want. You petition the state and jump through all these hoops and say, we need this amount of money, and then they tell you that, okay, we can go on the ballot for 0.75% or 1.25% or something. You don't decide what percent it is. But we can, there's data out there that shows that 1% of earned income tax in this district will generate about $3.2 million.
But also, how long does it take to get that money?
That's a good point. So you see the cliff that's coming from the 5-year forecast. And unlike what a lot of people think, you don't pass a levy today and start collecting money tomorrow. I mean, you pass a levy today, you don't collect a dime until January of the year after you pass it. And even then, it takes 18 months to fully realize the effects of whatever the tax is. 18 months from when it's passed. So if we passed it, say we went, I'm not saying we are, well, you guys will talk about this more, but if we went on the ballot in November, we could start collecting income tax if it passed in January, but we wouldn't fully realize all of that until 18 months out. So you don't want to wait until, you know, you get too far out here, because even if it passes, you're gonna go broke before you start to get the money from it. So you gotta kind of plan ahead.
So is it our plan to start now, maybe with a levy, or some first step, do not want to?
Well, I mean, I'm, honestly, there are some things that the superintendent treasurer are not allowed to discuss when it comes to levies. So I don't wanna put all the onus on the board, but I'm just telling you that we're not gonna be able to sustain unless there's additional revenue somehow. So,
It's very tight to have it on a November ballot at
For
this
this year?
point. It would be very, very.
we could put it on, the November ballot, but everything has to be done, every T has to be crossed, every I has to be dotted by, the end of July or August. First of August.
End of July.
End of July, so, you know, we're almost in the middle of July now. I don't know that I would advise doing it in November, because we want to organize and be able to win first time. And I just don't know that that gives us,
So
it'd be May then.
so if it were me, I would be looking at
May of 26, but then 18 months would be,
You're getting some.
You're getting some.
You're just not getting the full
okay.
benefit.
But we would eventually be getting something before the end of the 28 when we're in the.
And then you also, during that time, you're probably gonna have,
She's making a good point. She can see that she's getting so much money, but there is gonna have to be some cuts to sustain. And that's what you're asking, I think. In your head, you're counting that when we get money, we're gonna pass this levy. We're gonna pass this levy. But there's gonna be some cuts. There's gonna be some cuts to hold us off, because the money's not coming till 28. You see where we're at in 28.
Hopefully it passes in May.
because if it doesn't,
It's back on.
Then what, November 26?
yeah, but you're gonna see, this district won't look even remotely the same at this time next year. If it fails, it will fail. So we would have to make massive cuts.
Are you considering putting there one in May, when voter turnout in May is significantly lower than voter turnout in November?
All those things are things that, you know, we'll listen to what, I'm sure we'll listen to what you guys have to say. I can find studies that show that that's the best time to do it, and I can find studies that show that that's the worst time to do it, because more people are going, and honestly, in the last 10, 20 years, there's just more anti-tax stuff out there, and most people just vote no on taxes. So there's an argument to be had for, you know, the more people that go to vote, the more likely you're gonna have more votes.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Betty, I think that once the town knows the truth and sees this, because unless you're Phil or one of the board members, school funding is not somebody's cup of tea. But I think when they see it, and we can explain it to them, then they'll understand that this funding's not fair to Jackson. You know, it's a wonder we're still doing what we're doing with the amount of money. So I think it's gonna take time to tell everybody about that. And I don't think we can get there in November. I understand what you're saying, but I think we can make it a big deal, and I think in May, there'll be a lot of people voting. But we're gonna work really hard at this. It's gonna take everybody to get this passed. I don't want Jackson to be a shell of itself.
I'm extremely proud of what we do. But if we don't get that, it won't look the same.
You know, one of the things that we would have to take a look at is, are we gonna continue CEP, knowing that it's gonna cost us money, we're not getting it back on the back end anymore? So I could argue that, let's say you make $50,000, right? Just use 1%. I don't know what you guys would decide to go with, but 1% of $50,000 is $500, all right? If we do away with free lunch, you got 2 or 3 kids in school, how much are you gonna pay for your kids' lunches during that year? How much are you gonna pay for, because we're gonna be looking at probably
Pay to play.
some form of pay to play or pay to participate. So you're gonna get, you know, it's potentially, you could spend more money if you don't support the school, because you got 2 or 3 kids that you're buying lunch for, and you got 2 kids that wanna play sport, and you're charging, I'm not done any numbers, just done a number out there, $200 to play basketball or football or whatever. You're better off to just go ahead and vote for.
There's $600 down there, you play 3 sports.
We don't wanna get in a situation where, you know, it's happened to other places where districts where, you know, mom and dad say, hey, we can't pick one. I know you love all 3 sports, but you can't do all 3, we can't afford it. That kind of thing.
I think my biggest concern comes with we just passed an income tax, and now we're going to send another one to the
I understand.
community, and we're just in a pretty unstable period of time, like economy-wise, and I think, I don't know if you guys read the, you know you are from Jackson, but I do, and it doesn't look good out there. Because you're gonna have to do a lot more educating of the public, and you're gonna have to go to them, because they're not coming to you.
And I think that's where my question was coming from. I was gonna piggyback off of what you said, Ryan. You know, we need to get out there, we need to educate the community. And, you know, we've started that process already before this even really became, you know, known as to what we were facing. You know, getting out there with the rally and everything else. That started it. But what we need to do, and my question to everyone in this room is, what are you willing to do to get out and get the community educated? Because like Betty said, if you spend any time reading You Know You Are from Jackson, we are facing a major obstacle here in getting people to understand. All they know for the most, some of these, I'm not saying all parents, but there are a number of parents who look at sending their child to school every day a babysitting service, okay? They don't care what we're doing in the classroom as long as they know that their kid is okay and getting food while they're in school. They don't care what they do when they come home. They don't care if they do their homework or not. So we've got the success program. Guess what, guys? We might not have that success program anymore. We might not be able to, you know, to fund latchkey for these parents. And that's where we need to start. All of us, not just the board, not just Mr. Howard, and not just us as their teachers, but the educators as a whole in this district needs to come together, work together, okay? We need to organize together. I know we have 3 different unions in this district, but this is the time where we need to look at coming together as a whole group, all of us, administrators, everybody, and work together on this. Because if we don't, we are not going to get this passed ever.
So Betty, are you suggesting that they're not being?
I would personally suggest we just put it on that.
So where's the money gonna come
So
from?
then
I
we
think
just cut
somebody's gonna have to sit down and start thinking real hard. I think we're seeing a lot of kids go CCP. I think we can bring some of those kids back. I think we can do more to attract people to do open enrollment in Jackson, because we don't, I know we do a really good job athletically wise of promoting Jackson High School sports, but we are forgetting that Jackson High School, I am working with several people outside of the Jackson County area, and I always hear, they tell me, we have called you because we know Jackson promote, because if we're getting paid per kid,
But you're still talking about $4 million. I mean, this is not
okay, I'm
base
not
level.
saying that's gonna be the sole place, but I just think that if you're gonna slam the
And
community
you've
with
only
another
got
job.
you've only got a small window of time to do it.
You buy out, you buy out, teacher buyout. Alexander did teacher buyouts. Teachers close to retirement, they can do buyouts.
I don't think you don't have that, you don't have that many teachers.
We don't have that many teachers that are at that point. Right now, we are on the end of where we have a large number of younger teachers and very few teachers at the high end that are ready to retire. So, so that's where you gotta look at this and say, that's not going to be a real option for this district.
I just think that a lot of people are gonna turn around and say, you jumped immediately to placing an income tax on
But
it.
he's
And
already
they're-
proven that they haven't. He's already talked about all the cuts that they
It-
already
it-
made.
That's not gonna matter for the common person. Like, you're talking, like, people
That's
like
what,
my
that's what
family.
Jessica is telling us, that we need to share this information so that
Yes.
we're educated on it.
Right.
Yes.
And they need to know, I mean, that's the only way they're gonna find out is to get the word out.
It's something we have to remind, we have to remember. I love the discussion.
I love it too, but I can't hear very well, I need one side.
So just remember the income tax that just passed is for the city people only. There's a whole lot of different people out in the county that doesn't pay an income tax, it's city. So not all of our students are city students. So we gotta focus outside the city as well.
And if you're retired, it doesn't affect
It
you.
doesn't affect you if you retire.
Does it?
This would.
No,
No.
not necessarily.
We can do one that wouldn't affect retirees.
So if it was a property tax, it could bring so much money, it runs you off your home, your farm. If you're on a fixed money, retired, Social Security doesn't touch it.
And the property tax may not be here, like you're talking there, they're talking about doing away with it, so they're gonna have to come up with revenue for that, that doesn't affect the schools, that affects a lot of, and
I'm not saying that you go on levy or you don't, I'm just telling you that in 2 years, if something doesn't change and we don't have an additional revenue stream, and I'm not talking about having bake sales and car washing kind of money, I'm talking about millions, then we won't have half of what we have here.
I think it's important also to say that going to the ballot has not been the first thought. That is only because of what has just happened. Mr. Howard, every time an opening has happened over the last 6 months, Mr. Howard has looked very hard at, do we need that position? Because we are looking at a deficit anyway.
And then I've shown you what, even going back to, I've been here for 18 or 19 years, and we were looking at, being $9 or $10 million in the red. But what I had then that I don't have now is I had things that I could cut. I don't have that now. I mean,
I
you
just
have
think you
to.
guys are not reading the political climate out there in regards to how they view public education.
Okay, and that again is what we need to change. Here's another thing, and what you said makes good sense, the political climate, yes. And this is what I have said since the very beginning of me getting into this, is we need to make this a nonpartisan issue in our district, because levy on the ballot, great, let's start it out, next May, so that gives us plenty of time to get this organized.
I think it's also worth pointing out, and again, I'm not saying put one on or don't put one, but, we haven't done it, we haven't asked people for more money since 2000.
Yeah, it's 25 years.
Yeah, and it's worth also pointing out that that is coming off in a year. That additional tax money that people are paying is coming off in a year, because that bond's paid for on those new schools. Now, again, I'm not saying, I still don't think that even if you would ask for money, that it should be a property tax, because there's just too much uncertainty with what's gonna happen with property taxes going forward. But we haven't asked, I know districts where I've seen superintendents pick up the Columbus paper, and I've watched, they'll say, if you pass this levy, we promise we won't ask you again for 4 more years. I mean, if I say that down here, but that's what they say. And I mean, they know they're going on the ballot every 3 or 4 years. We haven't asked for anything, and we've done every single thing we can.
And we wouldn't be asking if you got the 4.6
Yes.
billion.
Yeah, if the state.
And on top of that was a 1.4 cut, so it's a double whammy. We lost 4.6 billion, then got cut.
And, I've tried to show that, nobody can say, hey, I just spent like drunken sailors, Look what's happened to our salary schedule over the years, I'm not paying you guys way too much money. That's obvious, we've gone from worst to worst, Again, I feel bad about that, but that's what we've had to do to get by. But we haven't asked people for money, and we don't jump and do it, the first thing. We've tried to cut as much as we can, but we're at the point of where, can it be done? Oh, it can be done, but it's gonna be painful. I mean, at the end of the day, when you get to the point of where you've exhausted, all of your options, you still gotta be able to pay the bills. So if that means cutting $2 million out of the budget, then however many people, because I've already shown you, we can't do it by, buying different kind of pencils and switching vendors for paper and stuff. I mean, it's gonna be people. Those of you guys that were here back then, I changed it back then, you remember? You probably want me to explain about the flood, it was terrible back then. I'd say it did $112 over that year.
We always knew when there were new dispensers going up that there was a change.
Well, I have one more comment. Both Shane Logan and Jason Stevens are up in 2026, okay? Now, both Jason Stevens and Shane Logan voted to support the budget, okay? Now, Jason Stevens talked to him in March, Betty was there, Candace, Bree, we were all there, and, oh yeah, I'm gonna, you've got my 100% support to, fully fund public education, I'm gonna do everything I can, blah, 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 and bing, bang, boom, he votes to support the budget, okay? Shane Logan was a whole other ballgame. We knew walking out of the meeting with him in March that he was not in any way going to support public education funding. He's all for building as many private schools as he can. But again, they're both up. Their term is up next year. And either, we hold Jason Stevens' feet to the fire long enough for him to, to support public education the way he says he will. And we need to find somebody who can beat Jason or Shane Logan, okay? He is in no way a friend of public education, okay? So we need to think about that. And even though I'm saying, oh yeah, I just said, oh, no politics, nonpartisan, I did that. But what I say is we need to keep it nonpartisan in the public, okay? But for ourselves, we need to remember who we need, to support at the ballot box in order for us to get the support we need in our districts, okay? That's what I'm saying.
And the problem with their terms being, they'll just flip-flop. One will go to the Senate, the other will go probably
Yeah,
to the
they'll
state rep.
flip-flop, yeah. So yeah, we need to kind of keep that, well, Shane Wilson just got into this is his first term in
It is.
Senate? Yeah, and, so he's going to run for another term in the Senate. Stevens, this should be, I don't know if he's got one more
can't keep up with
I
them.
can't either, but, yeah, either way, they're both up, 26.
But whatever you decide, maybe like open communication, and you're allowed to let us know, like what we need to do on our end, so. that
And that's why, you know, before this meeting, I called all three of the ones to see, or called all three of the union presidents and said, hey, you know, you might wanna tell your people that there's gonna be some discussion about this, so we're not trying to operate under the cover of darkness here. We wanna be as transparent as we can. Some of you might have an idea of something that myself, Teresa, or the board hasn't thought of that we need to take a look at.
Now, is there anything that you're looking at in the near future, that, right, maybe without, I know that we've already made some changes in staffing positions, whether they were filled or not, but do you foresee anything, any extracurriculars or anything like that being either, reduced? Let's say if there are 2 advisors for something, that you are going to cut 1 advisor or anything like that?
I think we're gonna, I mean, if you notice on the agenda tonight, we basically dealt with fall stuff. We're gonna look at every single thing going forward. I can't guarantee that there won't be wholesale cuts right now for, you know, people's, I know everybody, even when you do a supplemental, it's still money in your pocket, but it's not your livelihood, it's not your $50,000 or $30,000 a year job. We will analyze all those things, but I don't anticipate, unless the board, you know, directs me otherwise, because I've shown you, we'll get through this year. I just worry about if we don't do something by the end of the year, that then next year, it will be ugly. So I know I didn't really answer the question, but it's the best I can do right now.
I think he's already started that, we've replaced Adam Jones.
Yeah, I know there have been some
So
staffing
we're doing that,
positions.
I think,
There's like, I think there's 4 teaching positions off the top of my head right now that we're not filling. There's, we cut back on some of the,
days.
extended date and extended time that some of the people had. We've actually cut a couple of coaches, in some of the fall sports. And I can't say that there won't be some more of those kind of things, but we're not gonna, you know, let 20 teachers go, or, you know, get rid of a bunch of custodians or bus drivers or anything this year. I can't say, you know, what's gonna happen.
And Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, we knew this may be coming, but we were hopeful that the budget would come out much more favorable than it did.
Yeah, I mean, if we get that 4.6 million, you know, you guys are loving it, we're all loving it, you know, but.
Yeah, we just, you know, we had, till the governor signed it last week, you know, we weren't sure where we were gonna land, and it was worse than we had ever hoped.
There's a magic number, 4.6
Yeah.
billion more than we thought we were gonna get. And like Brian said, not only did we not get that, but they cut 1.4 million. So you're talking about, you know, $6 million swing there. That's hard to.
That looks a lot better when you have $6 million.
Oh, yeah.
Every one of those years.
Phil, I wrote some key points as we were going through it. Really, there's no magic. I mean, you guys we can share you the slides we have. I know Phil goes through it pretty fast. You're not fortunate enough to get it. He sends it to us twice a week and he drills it into our head, but we can provide all this information to you. It's also available online. 2-year budget was more crippling than we ever imagined to us specifically. I saw, it looked like Rock Hill gets hammered as well. They're probably having similar discussions. Really, we only can spend the money that we receive, whether it be local, state, or federal. That's all we have. We don't sell a product. So with that, I mean, you got 2 options. You either find another revenue source, such as a levy, or you make cuts. It may be a combination of the 2, but, I mean, it's really the cards you're dealt and the hand you're stuck with, when you're looking at losses this season. We're already deficit spending, we're already paying you guys less than we want to. So, you know, I don't know how much more we can do without, like Brian said, looking like the shell like this.
I do want to point out, I should have done this when I was talking there a while ago, but on on this particular slide, if you look at those last couple of columns, it has how much money that you have as a carryover, what your budget is, and how much you have as a carryover, and what percent. So for example, you know, at the end of fiscal '24, we had $7.8 million. Our budget was about $24.5 million, so we had a 32% carryover. But if you look down through here at how much of carryover some of these districts have,
There's 100.
here's Rock Hill's got 102%. So they can survive a little bit longer than us when you've got, county's got 29 million in the bank and their budget's 27 million. So, I mean, and again, I want to make sure, I don't want anybody going out here saying that I have been saying anything negative about any other district. That is certainly not my intent. I'm glad those guys aren't in the position that I'm in and that we're all in here. They've not done anything wrong, and I'd be doing the same thing if I were in any of their shoes, you know? It's just, I just want to point out that we're not funded the same way that all those other districts are. There was actually a piece of the bill that said that if you had a 30, was it 30 or 40?
It went from 30 to 40
It went
to
40.
50.
If you had a 40% carryover, that you had to, for lack of a better explanation of terms, give it back. The auditor was going to change the millage and reduce people's taxes, and you had to give it back. Now, he vetoed that. But they were talking about, you know, overriding that veto. Right now, I'm not overly concerned about that. I wish I had to worry about us having, 40-some%. I think a lot of times you're better off to have a lesser percent of carryover. I'd rather have a 20% carryover and not be deficit spending than have a 40% carryover and be deficit spending. And so here's somebody's, Lucasville Valley, they got 18.7 million in the bank and their budget's 13.7. They're not doing anything. Right?
Is the $6.8 million of federal money that was as of last week, like frozen? Like they're not releasing that to public school districts? Is that calculated in all of this?
No, that's not general.
So if we don't get that money, we're even more screwed.
Absolutely.
Okay,
That's
okay, that's nice.
Phil, you are seeing like delays in them releasing that funding as they investigate.
I think I sent you guys
You
the
did.
last email.
You did.
You know, we're getting from the state saying, you know, it hasn't been released yet, don't know when it's gonna be. Initially, they started telling us that, or basically don't worry about it, it's going to be, and now all of a sudden it's almost like we don't know. So, who knows what's gonna happen with the federal?
Yeah, they're basically telling us to hold tight
Yeah.
and hope.
So there's not much positive. Get out of here.
Because, I mean, we are a sports-driven community. I mean, we absolutely are. So I hope that you take into consideration, I know you would get backlash from the community, but I hope you would look at that in, I mean, I love sports. I am an avid sports fan. Coach, I've coached in the district, I've played in this district. But before you look at more teachers, education, you just consider that.
But the only thing I'll say about that thing is that, like I showed you, that the only way to, well, we go back to this one slide. The one year that we made a lot of cuts on our athletics, we saved assistant coaches $40,000. Now, I'm not saying that you don't do that, because it's only fair that there be some pain for almost everybody and not just, but, we probably cut 10 or 11 coaching positions to save $40,000. That's not even half of it. I mean, like I said, to get to $2 million, yeah, it's gonna have to be,
You're whispering, I can't hear.
Yeah.
We did that. She said that, is that 40,000, about a teacher, I said, no.
I mean, we just absorbed 4 teacher jobs, so I mean, I don't want to lose education.
I get it, and none of
Our
us.
kid is the future of our community. So we've got so many parents that take their kids out to play all year long. You know what I mean? What's about a season in high school or, a season here, there.
Yeah.
I just,
Oh, yeah, and I understand what you're saying, and we've thought about this, but here's what you gotta remember. You do away with sports, or you charge them $500 to come play, right? If he says, no, I can't afford that, you go to Beaver, we just lost $7,600, or $500.
There's a
So
fine
you
on
could,
what you
and then I wouldn't need the teacher, because we only got 1,000 kids.
what are you pointing at? No, I mean, Rio's using our facility, can we say, well, we told you, wrong figure, we need to. I mean, our utility bill went up, 50 grand, so we need you to pay that. Hey.
I like the way she thinks.
Well, my direction, I need to see all kinds of options and numbers and ideas and what it costs and really to make a decision. I want it to be, hurt the kid less, I don't want nobody to lose a job, but I gotta protect the kids, we gotta educate these kids.
I don't have, and Teresa and I don't have a lot of numbers right now for you, but I will tell you this, and I'm not saying we would do this, but this number just stands out in my head because we were just looking at it the last day or two, but, for example, preschool. Preschool does not pay for itself. Now, God knows you need preschool, right? But we spend about $300,000 more a year in preschool than what we get. So I'm not saying that I want to cut preschool. I'm saying you ask for options of things that could get cut. That's.
We all have master's degrees, several, we all have master's degrees, several work here, please don't fire me. I already did that once, Phil.
But what Jamie had said before was before you cut something like preschool, then maybe go the athletic angle. Because preschool is, like preschool, elementary school, that's the fundamental, like,
I'm not saying
step.
we're done. You're hearing what you want to hear. You're saying the same thing you did on your.
I mean, because our kids are already at a disadvantage sometimes than the kids up north already. So we want to provide opportunities. I mean, sports might be the only outlet. I mean, thank goodness we've developed the bowling team. We've developed these other esports teams that these kids don't have. Fishing. You know what I mean? How amazing is that we can offer these programs? So like Jess said, we have to figure out as a community, all of the unions involved, everything, what can we do to put these kids first and keep them first in Jackson County?
And talk about preschool, let's say, God forbid, it would come to that in this district. We also have to look at federal budget. Head Start programs, out. So that's going to leave our children at, again, like Jamie said, a major disadvantage when coming into kindergarten. Because there will be no options for them to go,
Listen, I don't think there's a single job in the district that the person that holds that position, and probably even me, can't make a case for, or we wouldn't have it to begin with. All right? So we know that every single position that we have here has value, and everybody has value. But at some point, if we have to make cuts, we got to make some tough decisions, and you're not going to make everybody happy. And you clearly can't poll everybody because everybody's got different opinions.
I think you had.
that's what we've been told. I mean, I'm assuming it will. I mean, everything else bad is happening.
I've talked to some other organizations that have federal grants, and they are already, they plan for them, they have already told them the money's going to stop it. Midstream, no money federally. So anything can happen with that.
Ron, you started to say your direction would be.
See every avenue of us saving money, numbers, ideas, plans. I mean, pay to play, I know we talked before, a long time ago, we talked about making our school, 2 grades. Switch them
Okay,
back.
yeah, that's a good point. I've talked about this. I can do away with 10 teaching positions and not really impact us in too bad of a way. Now, let me explain this, and it's not gonna be popular. But if our elementary buildings, instead of having 3 K through 5 buildings, if we had a K1 building, I don't care which building, pick one, Southview, Heather gets you K1. 2, 3, Westview, and 4, 5 is Northview, whatever configuration you want. Then we would have all of our kids at each grade level in the same building. So here's how that works. Right now, you have approximately, just take second grade, for example. You have 60 kids at each building, right? About 180 kids, 60 kids. You've got 3 regular teachers per grade level. So you have a 20-to-1 ratio. If I want to do away with a second grade position, the only way to do it now is one building goes to 30-to-1, because now there's only 2 people in that grade level in the building, and the other 2 buildings would still have 3. If we were all in the same building, now I got 180 second graders in the building. I got 9 teachers, so it's still 20-to-1, but if I want to do away with one, I divide by 8, I'm at 23-to-1. That's doable, I mean, not, yeah, I'd rather have 17 than 20, but 23 is doable. You're at 8. If you want to look at 7, you're at 25.6 or something like that to 1. We could argue that, is that doable? It is. I mean, nobody wants to do it, but it is. I know places that are worse than that. But you can't do that unless they're all in one area. So I understand that busing would be, that's a whole other animal. We have to figure, somebody smarter than me would have to figure that part of it out. But there would also be other savings there that would be hard to quantify. We order tons of materials, per grade level, and everybody's getting extra because you gotta have extra in each of your buildings. If you're all in the same building, I feel confident that you would save money on supplies and stuff. So you could potentially go to 2 teachers per grade level, K through 5, that's 6 grade levels. But we're already done away with 1 kindergarten position, so 1 kindergarten and 2 per grade level, so you're at 11 teachers and you're at 25-to-1 at the elementary level. Now, we still gotta figure out busing, but you save that much, and I don't wanna do that, but if you're asking me for options, I'm just listing every single thing.
You gotta have every option.
Because again, we're not talking about making cuts that you're gonna pay for with piddly $2,000 here, $3,000 there, or whatever.
I think everything has to be looked at before we can make the thing. How to get $5 million.
So you want us to come back with a list of savings?
I think that's what we need.
And I don't know that we can do all that even between now and the next meeting. It takes a lot of time to do
I
this.
understand.
Anything else?
Any other questions, comments?
I think we're about ready to wrap up here unless anybody has got anything else. Again, I want to thank you guys for coming. Like I said, I'm glad there was as many people as there was here. I used to walk up here for board meetings, and when I see all those cars, I'd be like, man, somebody's getting fired, and I don't even know. But I kind of knew what tonight was going to be.
So, I'm not really a question per se, but as far as making cuts and looking ahead to the, you know, the next year, like, I'm assuming that no one would be cut this year. Is that accurate, or?
I'm not going to go quite that far. We're still looking at, probably, there'll be very little cuts, if any, for the rest of this year.
Okay, but as far as.
Yeah, teaching positions,
Right,
yeah.
okay. But as far as the following year, would it be something that you would consider giving people a heads up?
Oh, and that's part of the reason, I'll be honest with you, I don't have the heart to, especially knowing that, you know, we can get through next year, even if we don't do anything, you know? But I don't really wanna call people in July and say, hey, you don't have a job, you know? Number one, everybody's already hired all their people for the year, so you don't, not only do you not have a job, but you don't have a chance to go get one. That's pretty crappy to do to somebody, so I don't wanna do that, but what I had planned is that, or I envisioned at least, is that once we come up with this list, that I would call people in and say, hey, you know, it's October or November, I need to let you know that unless we get some kind of additional funding stream coming in, we're probably gonna have to rip your position for next year. And then you have from October to, you know, whenever, and you know ahead of time. So yeah, I wouldn't want to blindside anybody.
And Alicia, to go that a little further, I mean, this was signed last week, so went out and invited everybody. I think the full intent of the entire board is to be upfront as transparent as possible. Like, we don't want any surprises. I mean, I've got 3 kids ago here.
I think in November, we're gonna, you know, if we would have to do levy and it doesn't pass, then, oh yeah. Yeah, we can give you a whole list of which way we're going out. But if it does pass, we just gotta hang on and do our best to survive the whole 18 months, and we'll be okay.
And you guys gotta stay local, you gotta stay on top of our legislators, our people in Columbus, because that's all we really have.
They know votes, and they call me up.
I've already made it a goal of mine to, Shane Wilson out of office. And I've been telling several people this, I'm supposed to go in my union district, SEOEA, I've told them that, I've told them so to OEA. I'm involved with, Olin for Ohio Kids, you know, they're with me on that as well, just for this area. So yeah, it's my goal, if anybody wants to join me, I'd be glad to have you. We gotta find somebody to run against.
And something we have to remember, the House has 33 new legislators this year. They're all out to make a statement, to get their name out on the books, and that's part of the problem. We have so many new people that they just are so selfish. And it's their own thoughts and their own needs.
So, Jessica, thank you for getting the word out to your people. Pete, I see a lot of your people here, Keller. Glad you guys can come. If anybody, you have an open invitation, if anybody has any ideas, I don't know that there's any, you guys say this all the time, your kids, hopefully, there's no such thing as a dumb question. I'm not gonna need that. So if you have anything you want to come to me and bring to me or suggest, I'm all ears.
And if you don't feel comfortable going straight to Phil, you can always let me know. I don't like talking to the guy.
I want to say one more thing. I know, Betty, what you said, you're right. And I don't like to go and hear all that negative. I'm a positive person. But one thing for sure is this town is incredible. It's the best town.
I don't doubt that.
And I think if we get out there and we show them the true facts, and I always tell Phil, you won't do it enough.
Well, what do you think we've been doing when we've been trying to rally support at these meetings? And we can't even get the teachers to come and show up.
Well, I think,
We get a handful.
I would imagine now that they see
about going to them. You can't just be like, oh, we're gonna have a meeting, and the people who come to the meeting are the people who are already supporting what you're doing. The people who aren't coming are the people you need to get to.
That would be my job too.
We're gonna do that. We're gonna win.
And I think they're going to expect to see all those, what did you do before you're deciding to throw a tax on us? Because we're getting taxed by the federal government, we're getting taxed by property tax and income tax, and now you wanna do it again? In a time where everybody is economically the worst off. Like they,
But we can already show today that loan, you know, what goes forward. We can already show
So we're just finding a low class.
but they don't trust you. That's the problem.
Well, and, you know, stuff like, I posted something, I don't know, last week, maybe before, and I had more people agree with me than I did disagree on, you know, the property tax. Every night I like what's up. And it was about public education. And so, and that's kind of how I gauge what's going on there. Yeah, you've got some loud mouths. Everybody does. But, you know, I'm seeing that change where more people are looking at it and supporting what's, you know, what I'm talking about, rather than saying I'm gonna fill it. So, I think that that's gonna be, in our favor as this goes on.
I feel fine. We're gonna make it.
We're over here, the board's over there, the supervision's right there. I think we all need to.
Any more comments? More comments? Board?
Yep, just thanks everybody for coming. We appreciate the discussion.
Have a motion to adjourn.